Before we dive in, I want you to imagine something for a second. You're in a busy airport, watching people go by. Just normal travellers, right? But then, you spot someone who doesn't quite fit in. He's dressed well, looks confident, but there's just something off. Now imagine he hands over his passport, and it's from a country that doesn't exist. The man insists it's real, even points it out on a map, but no one else has ever heard of this place. What would you do? Well, that's exactly what Japanese officials faced one summer day in 1954. A strange man, a mysterious country, and a disappearance that has baffled people for decades. And trust me, as the story unfolds, it only gets weirder. Let's get into it. In 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda airport, custom agents were dealing with the unusual sea of travellers, until one man caught their attention. This man, dressed in a sharp suit and carrying an air of confidence, calmly handed over his passport for inspection. As the customs officer opened it, he found himself staring at something completely baffling. The passport looked normal, stamped with numerous travel destinations across Europe and the Middle East, but the issuing country was listed as Taured. The officer glanced up, assuming it was a typo, and politely asked the man where he was from. The man, appearing somewhat annoyed, replied, "I'm from Taured." Confused, the officer asked again. Assuming he'd misunderstood, the man repeated, "Taured, between France and Spain." His voice carried the tone of someone stating an obvious fact. Now, the officer knew there was no place called Taured, and what was even stranger was that the man was insistent on it. Realizing this wasn't going to be a simple interaction, the officer called for backup. The man was led to a small interrogation room in the airport, while higher-ranking officers gathered. As the hours ticked by, more officers joined the interrogation, attempting to make sense of the man's story. He was calm, even somewhat irritated, as if he'd explained this 100 times before. He claimed to be a businessman, travelling to Japan on routine work. When they pressed him further, he pulled out currency from various countries, all authentic and documented, proving his employment with a company in Tokyo, a company that didn't exist. Growing more frustrated, the man took out a driver's license and pointed at his listed address. The address, he claimed, was from his home in Taured, but when authorities looked it up, there was no record of such location. They asked if he meant Andorra, the small country near the border between France and Spain, but the man seemed insulted. "No, not Andorra," he snapped. "Taured, my home. I've lived there my entire life." Perplexed, the officials handed the man a map and asked him to point to Taured. He circled a spot right on the border between France and Spain, but there was nothing there. The man's expression shifted, for the first time showing a glint of worry. He muttered under his breath in a language none of the officials would recognize, and seemed visibly shaken. Growing concerned that this was some elaborate hoax or potential security risk, Japanese authorities decided to hold him overnight in a guarded hotel room while they figured out what to do next. They confiscated his passport, documents and currency, then escorted him to a nearby hotel, posting 2 armed guards at his door. They hoped by morning they'd find some clue, something that explained this strange man's story. The next day, the guards went to retrieve the man from his room, but when they unlocked the door, he was gone. His belongings, including the passport, had vanished as well. The guards swore that no one had entered or exited the room, but the man had simply disappeared. Authorities were left with no explanations. They scoured airport security footage, but there was no trace of the man leaving the airport. They checked every local record, but found nothing. It was as if he'd never existed. Even today, Japanese officials remember the story of the man from Taured, and it's often whispered about among airport staff, passed down as an urban legend, but those who worked on the case swear it really happened. They say the man wasn't just from another country, he was from another world. One that had slipped through our reality just long enough for him to step into our own. And every now and then, this story crops up. A traveller with a passport from an unrecognised country. A businessman with memories of places that don't exist. As if a crack opened up between realities, allowing glimpses of other worlds, other versions of Earth, just long enough to remind us that our world isn't as closed as we think. And who knows, maybe, right now, there's someone in our own world who was born in a place they can never go back to. Thanks for listening.